Welcome everyone to today's AFSIA webinar. Very happy to welcome you again. We will give it a few more seconds. You know the drill. We'll give it a few more seconds for everybody to join us. We're very happy to be hosting three experts of the solar industry today: Ederin, Rajesh, and Akram. I will tell you a little bit more about them in a few moments, and they will tell you all about their specific expertise, which are, as you know from today's topic, maybe what most people consider small things, or maybe sometimes overlooked aspects, and yet very important aspects, which can sometimes make or break solar projects. So this is a very important and hopefully insightful conversation today that will help you learn a bit more about these less known topics of solar projects. So yes, people are joining little by little. I will already start with telling you a bit more about today's event and giving you some housekeeping details. So as I said, we are very happy to be hosting Ederin, Rajesh, and Akram, respectively from AMMP Technology, Hensel Electric, and Basec. And they will tell you about all these small things that can make a difference in a solar project today, or at least many. In terms of housekeeping, and before I give the word to Rajesh, just two very simple things. Yes, of course, the full presentation and the recording will be shared with you after the event. So you can, of course, ask the question, but I'm giving you the answer already now, no problem. And then the second aspect, which I think is important, is at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom control buttons. You see two different things, the chat and the Q&A button. The chat is really useful if you want to connect with fellow listeners, say hi, and just share a bit about you or about your company. But really, if you want to ask a question to our panelists today, please use the Q&A button. It's a special feature. The questions are recorded. So in case we are not able to address your question in the Q&A section today, for sure, this question will be recorded. It will be shared with our speakers, and they will get a chance to follow up with you. If you submit your question in the chat section, unfortunately, it gets lost. So this is it for the housekeeping. Really, I don't want to keep you away from today's topic, and I would like to introduce our first speaker today, Rajesh. Rajesh is the managing director of Hensel Electric, based out of India, international companies with several branches across the globe. And Rajesh really comes with a wealth of experience, 35 years in the solar industry, previously worked with companies like PowerRest and Data Switchgear. And is really like the best expert you can think of in terms of everyday electrical installations and solutions. And today we'll be telling us about a very interesting topic, again, in terms of connections and electrical installations, which I suspect many of us today are not necessarily fully aware of. So very happy to be welcoming you, Rajesh, and very keen to hear about your guidance on that specific topic of expertise of yours. So without further ado, I will give you the controls so that you can share your screen with the audience. And yes, over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, John, for this nice introduction. So let me share my screen. I think the screen sharing is disabled, so maybe you need to enable this for me.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. So then, good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you are. So I run you through a few slides. So the first topic is, of course, I myself, like John said, my name is Rajesh. I head Hensel's operations in Asia Pacific, Africa, and Middle East. So just to give you a brief introduction about the company itself, Hensel is a family business in the third generation now since 1931, which means we are already 90 years old this year. It's a fully owned German company. We are 800 people worldwide, 550 in Germany, the rest spread across the world. Small company, family size, turnover 100 million euros per year approximately. The headquarters is in a small village called Lennestadt. We say we are the market leader in the field of distributing electrical energy in the low voltage range, but limited to a few niche segments. So coming to photovoltaic, we talk of the standards itself. So we have a new standard since 2017, which is for construction of low voltage electrical installations. And in this standard, you have part 7.712, which specifically talks of, let's say, PV installations. And in this part 712.1, this defines the scope of installation in PV systems. So that's our topic, that's what Hensel does, and this is what we are going to talk about today. So especially here, there's one topic, we talk of protection class 2 for DC applications, because when you talk of DC installations, how do you protect people against electric shock? So this is a big topic because you don't have a circuit breaker that can trip anything. A DC circuit does not trip. So what the standard says is that the protective measure can only be by means of double or reinforced insulation, which means the equipment of all PV installation, distribution boards, cabinets, everything should be class 2 or protection class 2 or equivalent insulation. And so Hensel makes mainly combiner boxes for PV projects. So then we come to what the standard says about combiner boxes. So when they say wherever you have protective measure used on DC side is double or reinforced insulation, the combiner box should also be selected according to this application. So it's very easy to say that, let's select a combiner box for, let's say, protection class 2. But what does this really mean? This means that according to the standard, if you want to use an enclosure, or if you want to use, let's say, a combiner box for rated at 1000 volt, this has to pass an insulation test of 4665 volts. And similarly for 1500 volts. So this is something which most of us overlook because we really don't know what the standard says. So whenever you choose something, combiner box enclosure, please make sure that, let's say,
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
So please make sure that whenever you use a combiner box for 1000 volt, make sure that you have a certificate from the manufacturer that this is tested for 4.65 kV. Then, of course, the standard also talks about selection of electrical equipment. And here it says in general, because most PV installations come outdoors, they say in general you should have a protection degree of IP44 and a mechanical impact of at least IK07. But then there are special aspects when you talk of photovoltaic, because the PV array wiring, all associated components like, let's say, boxes or connectors or whatever.
Sorry, I'm still not sure about that.
These are often exposed to UV, to wind, to water, to snow, heating due to direct solar radiation, other environmental conditions. So that means in addition to IP rating and mechanical strength, there should be also a way to take care that you don't have water accumulation inside enclosures. You should make sure that there's no heating caused by direct solar radiation. So then we talk about what influence a typical PV installation. You have the sun, which shines bright. So PV, yes, solar is about the sun itself, but the sun also causes UV radiation. It also causes high and low temperatures. Then we talk of water. You have rain, you have snow, you have ice or frost, whatever. And then, of course, in many cases, you also have dust. So dust can also be from chemical influences, and then other chemical influences. You also can have mechanical influences. So these are all topics which influence a typical PV installation. So what are the effects? You have material degradation of enclosures. You have condensation in enclosures. You have corrosion of metal parts due to condensation inside. And the results are that this, let's say, you have a reduced life of internal components. Normally, the components are so expensive, and then let's say the life reduces. There are possibility of electric faults because of presence of water or dust or both inside the enclosures. Then we come to UV resistance. So this is one big topic in PV installation, that the product should be UV resistant. The standard talks a lot, but just to put it in perspective, there's a test of 500 hours, which every manufacturer has to fulfill. And then you can claim that your product is UV resistant. Of course, we talk about temperature resistance. So normally, we often misunderstand the temperature resistance of the material. We misunderstand this to be the ambient temperature. So for example, we talk of insulated enclosures, which the standard wants. So normally, these enclosures can withstand a temperature of starting from -40 degrees, going up to +120. But the enclosure doesn't play any role. What matters is that the entire assembly, which includes the fuses, the connectors, the cabling, the disconnect switch, the surge protection devices, this entire assembly has to withstand this ambient temperature. So this is something which, let's say, the manufacturer has to certify. He has to maybe give you a power loss calculation, clearly showing that, let's say, this entire assembly can withstand the ambient temperature that your installation is from. Then we come to condensation. So condensation, harmful effects, I think with high humidity in many places, you have increased electrical resistance, you have heat buildup, corrosion in metal parts. Due to this, you also have increased risk of short circuits. So these are a few topics that need to be taken care. How do you do it? Different measures. Normally in PV installations, we recommend that you go for passive compensation. You have pressure compensation elements, which can, let's say, exchange air from inside to outside, etc. You also have ventilation glands, providing the same function in addition to drainage devices. In case you have areas with high humidity, then if you have condensation water inside the boxes, then there are drainage devices which can drain water from the inside while maintaining your IP ratings. So this is also a possibility. With Hensel, we also another interesting product called the Dew Guard. This is simply a thin sheet made of polymer, and this absorbs and releases, let's say, excess moisture or moisture, depending on, let's say, whether you have excess, it absorbs. When you have very less moisture, when the air is dry, it also releases moisture into the combiner box. So these are a few measures in which you can take care of passive compensation. Then we talk of weatherproof installation, because in most cases in PV, the installation is done outdoors. So small things to take care, and with this, I think you can do a really foolproof installation. Cable entries as far as possible from the bottom, because let's say then it ensures that there's no ingress of water from the top in case landing is not proper. If you can try to bend the cables like these, or shown on the right side, then you can ensure that all water drains properly outside. Proper glanding is very essential. Sealing of enclosures, properly seal them. You can ensure that everything is set. You also have proper glanding. Let's say when you talk of glanding itself, most of us, we use metal cable glands when you come to outdoor installations. But and when you use armored cables in let's say outdoors, the problem comes that you have chances of corrosion, of degradation of material, and especially in photovoltaic, because we talk of protection class 2, fully insulated products. You have a metal cable gland which actually comes out of from inside to the outside. This means there's a break in insulation. And so for this, either use let's say a sleeve, a cable sleeve, or a gland which is shown on the top right, a gland which has a metal gland, but which also has an insulated cover or insulated covering from the top. So there's one way to ensure that you maintain protection class 2, you ensure that you have proper armoring on the cables, and then everything is done. Another small topic for weatherproof installations: simply put a canopy above the boxes. The canopy is not to do any great job, just that it ensures that you have protection against mechanical objects, plus it ensures that you have protection against direct sunlight. Now you might ask me, let's say when the enclosures are UV resistant, why do we need to protect it against direct sunlight? The enclosure does not need any protection. But when you have direct sunlight falling on the enclosures, you have a significant rise in internal temperature. And this can cause harm inside the combiner boxes if the temperature rise is not calculated properly. So just to be sure, simply have a canopy. I think it takes care of everything. So we summarize all the influences, what influences you need to take care when doing an installation outdoors. Degree of protection, IP rating, which is, let's say, very important, IP44 and above. Corrosion of metal parts should be avoided. UV resistance, of course. Temperature resistance, selecting the right devices with respect to this. Condensation mitigation, steps to ensure that you have no condensation or minimum condensation inside combiner boxes, and take care how to do a proper weatherproof installation. So that's a summary. Of course, let's say we can also take this offline, but we have a lot of technical articles on how this can be achieved. We do, let's say, when does a box start to sweat and how do you control this? So we can also send you wherever required. And then if you need more information, we are available on social media. There's an up-to-date website. You can get all information as far as possible, and let's say we can keep in contact. That's it from my side. Thank you again, John. Thank you again, panelists, all the attendees for your attention, and wish you a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. Presentation, as I like them, straight to the point, lots of info. Yes, of course, we are not able to go deep into details of everything, but this is, if this topic is of interest to you, well, I warmly invite you to follow up directly with Rajesh after today's presentation. There was a lot of info. Thank you very much, Rajesh. And we are continuing this quest for a bit more info, and this time we will hear from Akram, who works with the company Basec, based out of Dubai. Akram today is really like our cables expert, 15 years experience in this business, previously worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, Nexans, Elsewedi, Alfanar, a bit from the Middle East. And within this expertise in cables, it really covers everything, right? Akram, overhead lines, low voltage, medium voltage, high voltage. So really, we're really pleased to have you today to tell us a little bit more about the importance of solar cabling for solar projects. Again, something that is sometimes a bit overlooked, maybe, but you will explain to us how important this is and what difference this can make in future solar projects to be built. Yes, you have the co-host permission, so you can share your screen now. Akram, over to you.
Thank you, John. Please hold on to share this screen.
And while you are setting up your screen, I just remind everybody who is joining us today, at any point, just submit your question through the Q&A box, and then we will take as many as possible at the end of everybody's presentation. Yes, Akram, it's okay. We have your screen now.
Okay, great. Let's start. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this event today. 1 second. I would like to start by a quick introduction to Basec. Basec has been established in 1971 in Milton Keynes in UK. Basec delivers testing and certification of cables for the worldwide cable industry. The scope of cables covered by Basec includes the wire, power cables, control cables, signal, and datacom cables. And on top of that, the newly developed cables like solar and EV charging cables. Since 2019, the organization has grown internationally with offices in the Middle East, which I am presenting to you from it in Dubai, in Africa and South Africa, in Turkey, India, and in Asia. In addition to our head office, which is based on Milton Keynes, and also our lab currently in Milton Keynes. Today we'll have a technical insight into the solar cable by clarifying where and why it will be used, and what is the cable, the solar cable construction, and what are the used standard, what are the tests should be carried out to verify the quality of the solar cable. Then we will clarify what does the certification mean and what is the value of certified cable. The solar cable is a cable which is used in the DC side. So sometimes people, they are calling the DC cable. It's a cable which is used in the DC side of the solar system, and it is used for the interconnecting the PV modules together and interconnecting the PV modules to the inverter. The solar cable is a simple cable, a single core with copper conductor and cross-linked insulation and outer sheets. So it will be the cable which is used in the right-hand side from the inverter. Now we'll go through the solar cable standard. There are two main standards, the European standard EN 50618 and the international standard IEC 62930. Through these two standards, the design, raw material, testing have been defined to ensure that the solar cable will perform as required, to allow the solar system to operate with the highest efficiency as it is designed for, because it is a vital component which is connects the electricity, as I have mentioned, which is generated via these modules to connect to the inverter in order to convert to AC power, which you can use and connect it to the grid or direct to the load. Generally, the scope for these two standards is almost the same, with some more options for the international standard over the European standard. But both standards define the same cable, which is a single core cable, tinned copper conductor, cross-linked insulation, and cross-linked outer sheets, with rated voltage up to 1.5 kV. And as we have mentioned before, this cable is used only at the DC side of the photovoltaic system. There is some more advantage, or we can say some more options with the IEC standard over the European standard. The IEC standard giving an option for the stranded conductor class 2, while the European standard only defines the class 5 conductor. So it gives some more options for the designer for the PV system. Also, the size is up to increased up to 400 millimeters square, while the European standard is limited to 240 only, to 240 millimeters square only. Also, the IEC giving an option for multi-core conductor, even it is not used, but it is giving this option. Also, for IEC giving an option for the cables containing halogen and halogen-free cables, while the European standard only specifying the halogen-free cables. Another point, which is the maximum storage temperature in the IEC, they allow the maximum storage temperature up to 45 degrees. Here we can see some example for the test which we should carry out for any solar cable to be qualified according to the solar standard. You can see here the most important test for the solar cable, because it is unique for this type of cables. It is not required in most of the other cables like low voltage or medium voltage, which is the thermal endurance test. This test is according to the IEC or EN 60216-1 and -2. Through this test, we can verify the thermal capabilities for the insulation and sheathing material. Because it is a standard requirement that the cable should be withstand the conductor temperature up to 120 for not less than 20,000 hours. You know, the maximum operating temperature in normal operation, which it should be only 90, but through this test, we can verify that the cable can work for 20,000 hours at least, up to conductor temperature 120. Another test, which is the flame propagation test, which is through this test we measure how fast the flame will be propagated and will spread through the cable, and how the cable will resist this propagation for the flame in event of fire. Another test like weathering and UV test, which is one or two, is very important test because the nature of how the solar system is operate, it is always subjected to sun and high temperatures. So the cable, through this test, we will measure how the material will resist this degradation and will keep the same performance with these tough operating conditions. Another test, which is the cross-linking test, also is because as I have mentioned before, the insulation and sheathing material are cross-linked. So this the hot set test is very important to measure the quality of the cross-linking. Another two tests we need also to highlight, which is because they are very important because they are measuring the electrical performance of the cable and how the cable will perform its main role of connecting and transmitting the power between the modules and the inverter. So the DC test, which is very important because the DC is measuring how the DC resistance of the conductor and how it will if it is higher than the required value, that means more heat generation and it will affect in the performance of the full system. Another test, which is the voltage test, to make sure that the insulation material will withstand the rated voltage. The summary for this test is if the cable is not compliant to any of these tests, we have two scenarios. One of them is a complete failure, like if the cable is a thermal endurance test, if the cable failed for the thermal endurance test or the weathering test, or it will affect on the system performance. Like the case of DC resistant test, if the cable fail in this test. After we have gone through the solar cable standard and shown example for the test and how these tests are important to verify the cable performance. Now we will clarify what does the certification mean and why it's important to prove the quality of the cable which you will use in your project. The certification means that the cable is tested by an independent third party, and the cable has proven compliant to all areas of performance, like electrical, mechanical, reaction to fire, and chemicals. There are two types of certificates, the product approval certificate and type test certificate. Actually, the type test, it is not a certificate, it is only a report, and it is often misused as a certificate in the market. And in the next slide, we'll clarify the details comparison between both of them. As you can see here on the screen, these are the two levels of quality that you can select to your project, the type test and the product approval. For type test, it is only one sample for one size will be tested. While for product approval, many samples will be with different sizes will be tested over the 3-year certification period. On top of product testing, only the product approval includes initial and continuous auditing for the manufacturing facility. To check the quality management system, the manufacturing processing, testing equipment, all other activities within the manufacturing facility, to be checked in order to make sure that it is as per the standard. Also, which auditing is not existing for the type test. Only the manufacturer will send a sample to the third party, so there is no auditing. Also, another important point, which is the validity of the type test. It is not defined. There is no validity time for validity date for the type test. While for product approval, it is 3 years. Then it should be renewed. A final vital point between the type test and basic product approval, which is the sample selection. The sample selection for type test made by the cable manufacturer, which will open the door for a golden sample. While for basic product approval, basic auditor are the ones who selecting the samples to ensure objective and neutral selection. So you will make sure that many samples with different sizes will be tested through the certification time within the 3 years. So you are making sure that the same quality levels are maintained. So there are several reasons to demonstrate the value of the basic approved cable as listed in this slide, and to avoid using the most common practice for the type test. The independent approval demonstrates the verification that the cable has been designed and contains a suitable material to perform as intended. So through this, through the product approval, you will make sure that all the material which is used is meeting the standard. Also, through the third party, there is an involved in a rigorous testing for many samples, not only one sample to be tested. Another important point, which is the ongoing surveillance, which is a key part of the approval process. And in Basec, it's a dedicated cable expert auditors who are selecting this sample and performing these audits. All this process, which is the auditing and the cable testing, will bring benefit for all parties. For the specifier and end user, project owner and investors, it will give them the peace of mind that the used cable in their project are under continuous quality checks. It is not a check on a certain point like the type test, it is continuous quality checks. And for even for the cable manufacturer, it will help them to clarify and identify and flag any issues they have in the quality. Maybe they are not, because some tests are only type testing, so they are not performing regularly. But via Basec, when we are performing continuous testing, we can catch any hidden points that it will help the manufacturer to identify and flag these issues and take proper corrective and preventive action. This is a quality mark for Basec. You can see on the cable approved by us, and this is the contacts. You can contact us for anything related to cables. Myself as a group technical manager for Basec, and Tertius, our regional technical manager who is in charge of Africa region. Now I finish, and I will hand over to you, June.
Thank you very much, Akram, and thank you for walking us through the entire logic and process of testing and certifying cables, and why that makes a difference on some solar projects. I'm sure there will be some questions submitted through the Q&A, and we can address those later. While the first two sections of today's webinar were focused on equipment and things that are important to consider before the installation is actually being done, we are now welcoming Edwin from AMMP Technologies, who will be telling us about remote monitoring of projects. There was a very interesting article published by Cross Boundary a few weeks ago, where they came to the conclusion, by monitoring the actual performance of their projects that they had been involved with, that actually there was a discrepancy between what the projections had been made based on software with the actual generation. And indeed, that's quite an important point, especially when you invest in your own solar project, or if it's a third-party investment and you're looking for return on your investment. So definitely very happy to have you here today, Edwin, and to get your point of view about the importance of monitoring and the importance of the solutions you can bring to developers. Just a quick word about you before I hand over to you. So as I said, you're based in Nigeria, working with AMMP. You've been in the solar industry for 5 years now. Worked among others with GE Power before, and yes, your focus is really on helping developers and project owners develop more and more skills in scaling their efforts and through the use of solar, of remote monitoring and also management. I hope you will be telling about this because your solutions encompass a bit more than just remote monitoring. So this is enough of an introduction. Ederin, very happy to see you again with us today, and please, over to you.
Thank you, John, for the kind introduction. I will go ahead and share my screen here.
Yeah. You need to share it again, I think. There we go. It's coming now.
Right.
Yeah.
Oof. 1 second. Yeah.
No problem, Ederin. We see your map.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Good day, everyone. Morning, afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Ederin. I lead the business development for AMMP Technologies, like John has said. And I want to just talk to you very quickly about AMMP Technologies. We're an Amsterdam-based tech energy company, and we partner with owners and operators of PV and hybrid assets across quite a few markets here. And what we do is we work with them to help streamline the technical and commercial operations in their company using our remote monitoring and management platform. And as you can see, we have a decent footprint. We're monitoring nearly 1,000 of these kind of systems across 25 countries. Now, so on this topic of small things that make a difference, I want to cover this from the monitoring angle. And I'm going to stay definitely relevant, but a little bit high level. And so in the Q&A, you can feel free to ask me more specific questions. But our outline is, I'll talk to you about remote monitoring in the renewable energy value chain. We'll look at some areas where monitoring might be relevant to you, to your project. And then lastly, I want to just look at what traditional and advanced monitoring looks like. So now if we're looking at the life cycle and we split it into planning, development, and then the operations and management, it's common knowledge that monitoring is very strong in the O&M after the project is built. But monitoring is also relevant in the planning and development sector or site. So in planning, through conversations, we know that including monitoring actually boosts investor confidence, because it gives them, knowing that they'll have visibility into the operations of the site, is something that kind of offers a halo effect, is the word that an investor told me. On the development side, there are some monitoring providers that actually play in this load site assessment, just because of the ability to, acquire the data acquisition abilities of monitoring, and of contributing significant value there. And then in the O&M, the data unification, O&M optimization, and then just stakeholder management and enhancing your business model. Now, how relevant is monitoring for your project? So I have just a few questions here that for owners and operators of portfolios to think about, and it shows you where monitoring can be relevant. So the first, are there elements of my business model that require digital infrastructure? So this could be the billing side, managing service level agreements. If you have these things, do you want to do that in-house, like have a team that builds the digital infrastructure for you, or do you want to outsource it to people who specialize in it? Similarly, how do I plan to manage my assets? Is this in-house or are you outsourcing? If it's in-house, do you have the local capacity to do that for all your different sites? What technologies, devices will I have at the site? So what is the complexity of your project? Do you have a lot of equipment that is normally offline, so people have to go to the sites to investigate them? Do you want to bring that online? And lastly, which stakeholders will be involved in the project? Okay, if you are a developer, your EPCs, do your customers want to see what's going on? And how much of that do they need to see? Do they need to see all the specifics or just high level? Now, I ask these questions because management without monitoring, even on just a project level, can be very messy. As you can see, just many different parts of developing a project, from the equipment to the stakeholders, the type of inverters you're using. It can be very messy on a project level. So it's important to think about these things. And the choice of a monitoring solution you use, the purpose of monitoring, first of all, is just to streamline this management. I used AMMP here because I'm not going to use a competitor, but essentially a good monitoring provider should be able to do all of this for you. Take all the information and make sure that it is going to the right people. Now, the type and scope of monitoring. I want to use these definitions of the traditional and the advanced. The traditional would be using the inverters portals, the inverters monitoring platform, and then typically coupling that with spreadsheets, probably Excel. And then the advanced would be, of course, going and getting a provider. Now, just something that you can do just right now if you're an owner of a portfolio, if you are not already using your vendor portals, that right there is low-hanging fruit for you, because there are significant benefits. And actually, most of the inverter providers offer monitoring free of charge. So right there is something that can already contribute considerable value, because these solutions are actually very strong. But if you're finding yourself maybe limited in some, just because of the type of business that you have, or I'll explain a few more of the reasons why you'll need advanced. But if you're finding that a bit tight, then you look into a third-party solution. So giving the specifics now of just from what we have noticed from our years in the company of what profiles benefit the most. So the traditional, if you require standard visualizations, reporting, data handling, you have a smaller portfolio, or you're maybe using all the same type of vendors, traditional will get you everything that you need, and it's free. But if you have a larger portfolio, and what we witness is that larger portfolios tend to offer this vendor flexibility, and so you're using different portals. A profile like that can be a bit limited with the traditional solution, so you might want to explore an advanced. Also, if your portfolio is still small, but you have a more complex setup, so hybrid systems, maybe PV grid, battery, diesel generator, so different sources, and these offline devices, fuel level sensors, temperature sensors. Working with something like that, you'll find yourself more in the advanced territory. And lastly, if you are there's a lot of customizations, either in reporting, access controls, alerts. I would even put the whole enabling business models. You have very, very specific requirements. That also falls in the advanced. Now, so we did a study just showing some of the cost reductions that can come from monitoring. And as you can see, I've separated the traditional and the advanced. So depending on your profile, so this study was done for a sample set of sites that had so they were hybrid, so they had diesel generators, batteries involved, and were remote sites. But depending on your profile, you can already start with, or if you are even using the vendor portals, you are probably already experiencing some of these savings. But if you are not, you can start using that and enjoying some of these. But yeah, with component replacement, already finding that with monitoring, you're able to increase the product lifetime, the asset lifetime, and reduce component costs. For traditional, to 9%, advanced up to 19%. With logistics, just being able to, you know, address issues without having to send someone to these remote sites physically, that was reduced 9%, and then for the advanced 18%. And then with labor, being able to, you know, with a lot of these solutions, you are not just monitoring one site, but you are monitoring a whole portfolio. And so being able to do that, monitoring more sites, few people, reduction in labor, and then also being able to intelligently troubleshoot, you know, identify the specific issues. With all of those things, we found reduction of labor, 23% with traditional and 46% with advanced. So the overall O&M savings were about 15 and 30. Some other costs that can be avoided through proper monitoring planning. You know, unnecessary CapEx. This is something that we actually encounter quite a bit, because sometimes people view monitoring on a per project level. But there are, depending on your project portfolio, you might not need hardware at your site for monitoring. It could probably be done by just, there are different providers that offer just a software integration. So that's unnecessary hardware. That's also that, knowing that that's an option. Maybe sites that are viewed as too small to spend money on the hardware, you can now actually onboard those, because now it's just software. Time wasted by highly skilled labor on manual tasks. This I encounter regularly, you know, speaking to an O&M manager who is having to access like 8 monitoring portals for the small portfolio, and having to check that 3 times a day, right? So this is a very intelligent person, but having to spend time on this important, but arguably very manual task, right? So an advanced solution there addresses that issue. Lost yield. Had a call with a company in Asia that this site almost a megawatt, and one of the strings was out, and it took 20 days for them to identify this, and that was 5% of their yield lost because of their monitoring situation was not strong. So something like that, easily avoidable. And then lastly, customer dissatisfaction. You know, as developers, obviously you want your customers to be happy. The last thing you want is for them to call you about a shutdown, and then you're just finding out from them. You know, if you have the visibility, you can mitigate the issues before they escalate to a shutdown and keep the customer happy. So these are just some of the things I want to just quickly round up. Just a few just rehashing some of the things I said earlier. When you're planning a project, just consider the parts of your business where monitoring can be relevant, you know, where this digital infrastructure is beneficial. Grab the low-hanging fruit. I mean, it already came for free, like just, you can start using that and getting the benefits, because management without monitoring can be messy. And then lastly, ensure to use the type of solution that is suitable for your scope. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be working with amazing developers in the industry. Happy to take any questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edwin. And thanks for this transparency. I'm sure many people are very happy to hear that yes, the solutions that are provided by the inverters can be great for them depending on their situation. But yes, of course, we also understand that once you start growing your portfolio or growing your requirements in terms of monitoring, then it becomes time to move to something a bit more professional, let's say, or more dedicated. So yes, thank you very much for candidly sharing about this. And so yes, I want to move to the Q&A section. And maybe Akram, Rajesh, please feel free to turn back on your camera so we will see you. First question, a bit of a admin question, but not all of you did get a chance to highlight your presence or level activity across the continent. Could you quickly explain again where you have offices or where you have teams or where you have done projects, just for the listeners to have an idea, because you're calling from all parts of the world today, but you are already present in Africa. So good for everybody to know. Maybe I'll start with Rajesh.
Yeah, thank you, John. So as I said earlier, Hensel is a company based in Germany. So we are more active in Europe, Asia Pacific. In Asia Pacific, we are centered in India, and then we have a company also in Singapore, and then nowadays also in Indonesia. And we have done projects of more than 4 gigawatt.
Rajesh, we're losing you a little bit. Maybe we'll give your connection a bit of time to resume, and we will come back to you. Akram, what about Basec in Africa?
Okay, but, as I have mentioned, Basec is for 50 years they are already in Milton Keynes in UK. We are very well known in the cable industry worldwide. Next month we will have another lab in Dubai in UAE. We have many regional offices in Turkey, in Asia, in Dubai, in India, and also this year we have our office in South Africa. And the contact, our main contact here there is Tertius, is my friend, and already I share his email, so they can contact Tertius or myself for any inquiry related to cables in Africa. We are very happy to support, especially as I have mentioned, this is a very critical part, which is connecting all the electricity from the modules to PV modules to the inverter. If it is this component with low quality, you will lose the efficiency for the full system. That's why we are very interested, and we are very keen to raising the awareness about the role of cable in the solar system, because many people, they are overlooked. That's why we are here today, and we are doing many sessions in order to raising the awareness for this regarding this vital component. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ederin, what about the AMMP team?
Yes. So I think the map I showed earlier, just those are the places where we are operating. As for the AMMP team, we are spread out across Europe and Africa as well. I will just add, I know I saw quite a few messages about the presentations, so they will be sent, and they have our email addresses in them. So please reach out to Hensel, reach out to Basec, reach out to AMMP. We're eager to discuss. Thank you.
Rajesh, how is your connection? Are you back with us?
I think yes. I think it seems stable now. So
okay, good.
Let me try again. So Hensel is let's say from Germany, so we are quite strong in Europe. We're also very active in Asia Pacific, Africa, and the Middle East. In Asia Pacific, we operate mainly out of India, China, Singapore, and nowadays Indonesia. More than 4 gigawatt of projects in Asia Pacific region with top developers, companies like Toshiba in Japan, etc., etc. In Middle East and Africa, we are based out of Dubai. So that's a central office. And in Africa, we mainly work with distribution partners. So we have partners in East Africa, we have partners in South Africa, in some other regions. And we would be more than happy to also, let's say if somebody has some requirements, you have my contact details, you can contact us, and then we can service you very well out of UAE.
Thank you very much. And I was asking the question because we have listeners literally from all over Africa today with us. Some of them located in quite demanding environments in terms when we speak of solar. I mean, some people from North Africa, some listeners from Namibia. I would like to have your point of view on is the impact of these very high temperatures. For Rajesh and Akram, really like the impact on your field of expertise, and then maybe later we will ask Edwin what he sees from projects in these locations based on the remote monitoring and maybe some tricks that he has learned with his clients about how to mitigate that temperature effect. Rajesh, I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, so from our point of view, what we always ask our customers, or anybody for that matter, when you buy a combiner box and you know that you have a specific ambient condition, you should really ask the manufacturer for a temperature rise calculation. Normally, everybody claims that most of them have it certified and all that, but exactly to your conditions, you should ask them for a temperature rise calculation. Satisfy yourself that all the components are in order, and then proceed to make a purchase order. And this way you can ensure that, let's say, that the manufacturer understands your requirements. He has made a product exactly to your installation and not for somebody else.
Thank you very much. Akram, from your point of view on the cable expertise, does temperature play a role, or are cables relatively flexible with this?
Definitely, it is a very critical part. That's why, as you can see, there is a specific standard for solar cables. The reason why is a very tough environmental condition. One of them is a very high temperature, which is one of the main challenging point for operating the cable. Because as you know, the maximum operating temperature for cables with this cross-linking material, it should be 90 degrees. But with very hot temperatures in some areas like here in Middle East or in somewhere in Africa, the temperature may be raised over 60 or 70 in the desert area. So by this way, the current carrying capacity or the power can be transmitted through the cable, it will be limited. That's why one of the vital tests should be done for these cables in order to qualify to work in these conditions, which is a thermal endurance test. Through this test, we can verify that the cable can withstand 120 degrees for not less than 20,000 hours. So this point is very well considered in the cable standard for cables, because really it is a very critical part. And if it is not take care about this point, many fire accident and shutdown for the system, it can happen.
Thank you very much. We will talk about fire hazard in the next question. Before this, Edwin, on your side, I mean, you are monitoring projects literally like over half the continents, if I remember your map correctly. Do you see, I'm guessing you see some big differences based on the locations, but more importantly, like, is there anything that people can do like preventively thanks to this monitoring services?
Yeah, certainly. I think where, and to a point you mentioned at the beginning of going beyond just monitoring, I think what we have tried to do with our solution is really harp on the enabling business model aspect, because whatever region you are in, I mean, for a myriad of factors, policies, temperature, different developers are going to use different business models. And so having just like a very static monitoring solution might not be the way to best serve them. So for example, regards to this temperature element, one of the things that we do is just try to integrate with every technology that you have on the sites. And so there was one company that because of the very high temperatures, they had to put all the batteries in a room and have the AC on, and they had a temperature sensor there. But someone would keep leaving the door open, and so they would be getting on the platform. We would give them alerts on that to just avert something as simple as that. But the idea is just enabling people to run their systems the way that they want to.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Akram, we just briefly spoke about the fire hazard. I would like to ask you all the question about, I mean, everybody knows there is fire hazard, but is there any data about this? Which level of risk are we talking about? Are there some conditions which are more prone to fire? Have you experienced, thanks to the project you've worked on, significant cases? Just making this risk a bit more tangible for the people listening to us. Maybe Akram, I can start with you, and then I'll move to Rajesh.
Okay, as you mentioned, this is a very also critical point, because most of the accident which is happening within the solar system, which is the fire accidents, I will speak about my part, which is the cables part. There is many factors and many issues in the cable may lead to this fire accident. One of them is, as I mentioned, if with these very tough conditions, if the material cannot withstand this high temperature, it will with higher temperature it will make short circuit, then it will lead to fire accidents. The conductor resistant, definitely, because it's connected to the same point. If the conductor resistance is high, so if it is designed to carry certain power or certain current, but this calculated based on is maximum DC resistance. If the DC resistance is increased, so more heat will be generated. So again, it will lead to the same result, which is fire accident. And these usually happen when people are overlooked for this one and only use non-standard cable, or using cable which is not designed for this specific application. As I have mentioned, people usually mixing and only using any cables, because as I have mentioned, the cable is very simple: conductor, insulation, and outer sheaths. Some people, they are some cable manufacturer already, I know it supplied some project which with normal cables, copper XLB, low smoke, according to IEC standard, not according to the BVS standard. This cable may work for a few months, for 1 year, but after that, it will be whether it will affect in the performance of the system, whether it will affect when an big accident, which is mostly it will be because of fire, because it will not withstand this very tough temperature. That's why we are ensuring, please, we have to use the cable which is fit for this purpose. If you need to use any cable in the DC side, it should be according these two standards, whether the EN 50618 or the IEC 62830. So these two standards should be considered during, if you are the project owner, if the one you put the specification, so this standard should be considered, and also some evidence that the cable is matching with this standard. The point is, maybe you specify the standard, you specify the right cables, but the point is how you will verify the cable which you will use matching with this standard.
I think everybody listening to us today will get the message, and they will jump on this paper to certify the quality of their equipment. Rajesh, what about you in terms of fire hazards? Do you have some data to share, some statistics maybe, or some personal experience? What's your view on the topic?
I tend to agree with Akram. Most of the accidents come somehow via the cable, and in many cases due to undersizing of the cables to save costs. And then you combine this with high temperature, combine this with all the other factors around, you have a ready-made, let's say, recipe for disaster. And in this case, and for us, with our combiner boxes, we call the combiner box the weakest link in the entire system, because that's where all the terminations are coming in. That's where all these strings are coming in, getting terminated. And then you have an undersized cable, and then you have a loose termination, and then you have excess heat. It's a real cocktail. So unless, let's say, a developer or an EPC who's doing this job, unless he learns to choose his components wisely and carefully, instead of saving a few pennies, then he can really save a lot of money upfront on maintenance, on everything. Otherwise, this will be a constant process, penny wise, pound foolish. This would be the case later. So that's our view.
This is a great introduction to my next question, actually. Talking about money. Edwin told us he did some analysis about traditional monitoring and what you can already save with this more advanced monitoring. So that was already very clear. And of course, there are some differences. But I want to play devil's advocate here. I want to imagine I'm a developer, and well, your solutions of higher quality or better certification standards are probably a bit more costly. How should I consider this extra cost? Because honestly, clients, they want the cheapest solar installation possible. So what would be your recommendation?
The cost is how expensive, and let's say how expensive is how expensive in the long run. So you pay a little more upfront, and then you save let's say a lot of years of worry. So let's say I can put it in perspective with a story, let's say. So we had when we were introducing our products in Hungary in the 1980s, I would say, when they were all, let's say, in the 1990s, when the iron wall had just fell, and then we were introducing high quality products to Hungary. So we had a range of enclosure systems which we introduced, and the Hungarian energy minister lady, she came to the stand, to our stall, and then so our country manager at that time, he told her that, so she appreciated the quality very much, and then he told her that, of course, but the products are a little more expensive. And this lady told him, we are a poor country, we cannot afford cheap products. So this is, let's say, what a developer should take care. You want an installation for a lifetime, or do you want to continually do maintenance on the installation? Or do you want to continually upgrade? It's a call. And if it's double the cost, okay, then you have let's say you have something to say. But if you are looking at 10, 15, 20% upfront extra cost, it's worth it when you consider the yield, when you consider downtimes, your loss of generation. I think it pays out much, much more than what he would expect.
I just need to add one point here, John. I am not agree with you that to call it is more expensive, because okay, it is more expensive, as you mentioned, Rajesh, upfront. But if you evaluate, because this project is made to long for 25 years, which is specified. This the cable standard mentions that this cable should withstand 25 years, and through the testing we can verify that. So if you use a low quality product, then your system will not continue with the same performance for this long time, and you have to replacement, you have shutdown. So you will pay much more than if you will go for the good quality and meet the standard for each component. I am care about the cable, but I believe each component should be deal in the same condition. You have to select the highest quality for each component in order to have a good system which is can work in the same highest level of performance for 25 years. Otherwise, you will waste your money.
I think that answer is pretty clear. Now it's all a question of convincing the customers. But thank you very much. I'm looking at the clock and I see that we're already slightly past time, but I still have a few more questions for you. So just a few more minutes. And these are like specific question to one of the speakers today. The first one would be to Edwin. You briefly mentioned about is that monitoring could could enhance or could maybe even create specific business models. Could you please elaborate on this a little bit and explain what you see as opportunity? Maybe there are companies out there doing great work, but not realizing what extra they could be doing thanks to monitoring.
Certainly. Yes. So I guess I can talk about maybe some of the business models that we have bumped into and talked about of how monitoring can help and are helping some of them. I think the most popular is just the typical energy service provider, but I would say there's also models of which is that they sell the energy, they sell the kilowatt hours. But there's also the energy as a service model where you are doing additional services to selling the kilowatt hours. And something I mentioned earlier about, so in that kind of a model, they need visibility over every technology device at the site, and then also just managing some of the customer dynamics. So that would be the customer gets a certain level of visibility into the operations. There's also shared visibility on, so for example, the service level agreements. So if they are using outside of the typical PPAs, maybe they're using time of use lease agreements with time of use restrictions. So for something specific like that, you need this single source of truth for both the company and the customers to be able to see why they are being charged to this amount within this time period. And to do all of that, again, it is their model, and they need to offer that to the customer because that's the model that they're going with. But it's a bit challenging to have an internal team to, I mean, it's definitely doable, but you have to devote a lot of resources. But your main job is, getting business, developing projects. Somewhere like that, having a third-party monitoring solution creates the infrastructure for that. But that's one specific one. But we are also building the vendor portal. We're also building the monitoring platforms for other vendor manufacturers. And also, doing similar energy service provider work for businesses that are not in they're also in like telcos, for example. So those are just a few scenarios that apply. It's easiest to just have a conversation. Does this apply to me? And then we'll tell you yes or no.
I was gonna say that. I mean, the solutions seem to be quite endless. So the best is to have a chat with you and check if you can do something or not.
Exactly.
Akram, over to you very quickly. You mentioned something about EV charging cables, and Alicia was wondering if you could very quickly explain what is the difference between a solar cable and an EV charging cable.
Okay, quickly, for any cable, in order to have a cable, you need a conductor, you need a conducting material, and you need insulation material in order to transmit power. Mm-hmm. But we have different type of cable, different construction because of application. So once the application of the PV solar cable is different than the EV charging cable because the environmental condition is different, they are pretty much different between both of them. It is not very big, it's not have big difference. But for example, this is a single core, there is a multi-core because you are transmitting, whether it is single phase or three phase, so it is multi-core cable. It is here it is flexible and there is flexible, but again, material wise and testing wise also there is some differences. That's why the EV charging cable have a totally different standard, a specific standard for this charging cables. And who is asking for this one, he can contact me. I can have a presentation the same for and introducing the standard, the challenging, the testing for the EV charging cable.
Very good. We have quite a few very innovative e-mobility companies growing across the continent. And there's definitely a link, a strong link
There is a
between
link, yes.
PV and EV charging. So this
Okay.
is a very hot topic here. Thank you very much. And Rajesh, I'll close today's session with you, not with one, but with two questions, if that's okay with you. Question number one, we spoke about very high temperatures and what the negative impact this can have on the equipment and the solar project. But there's the problem of humidity and condensation as well. Would be great if you could briefly talk about this. And then there's another question, which is to you, but I guess to the three speakers today. People are asking, can we test your products, or do we just need to blindly believe what you are saying and we need to buy them? So that's more of an open question to finish. But Rajesh, please, about humidity and condensation.
Yes. So with high temperatures, the issue is with the difference in temperatures, which is prevalent mostly across Africa, you automatically have condensation. So with condensation, again, mitigation of condensation requires different ways. So a few ways which let's say which I showed in the slides. What we recommend is passive compensation, because you don't need power, you don't need any maintenance, small components with which you can do. But the most important aspect is that customers are aware that condensation can happen, and let's say they should be prepared to address this in let's say with the seriousness that it should be. Coming to the second part of the question, of course you can test it. So what we do is there are two ways: you can believe, you can test, you can do both. So in some cases with our customers, let's say we have a third-party certification for all the products, but in some cases when the large projects, customers ask us to do a special third-party certificate just for the product that we make for them. And this is definitely done, let's say, depending on what they need. So it's, and finally, I think the best result is to have a satisfied customer this way or that way. So we are fully open to this.
Akram, well, you are in the testing business. So.
I am very happy by this question. I am very happy by this question. But really, anyone, frankly speaking, anyone can declare anything about his product. But the point is how I can trust this, what you are selling me is right characteristics or no, or meets the standard or meet my requirement or no. There is no any other evidence than testing and certification by a third party. So it is highly recommended, especially it is new project, and we are going for increasing the usage of solar, and also for the charging cables or whatever the application. Each component should be tested and certified by a third party. Definitely, it is highly required, and this is the evidence for the developers, the investors, the designer to make sure that the material components used in his project meeting the standard.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And Edrin, what about your monitoring solutions?
Yes, you can. With our software integration, you can be on the platform by next week. So it can be a very quick test and you make your decision quickly.
Sounds like a great plan. Well, very happy to finish on such a positive note. I'm sure you will get several emails and calls. I would like to thank the three of you, but also all the people who took some time to join us today from their busy schedule. And well, I hope this was an interesting session. I hope you learned something today, and we will be having more such sessions and more activities in the near future. I would like to tell you very quickly, next week we have something new, something fun. We have the big Africa Solar Quiz. It's on September 20 on a Monday evening. It's really like the idea is to test your knowledge about solar in Africa. We've got some easy questions, but we've got some very difficult questions as well. So if you want to know if you know your industry, well, this is definitely the place to be. It's a 1 hour. You can team up with your colleagues or with your friends. And if you're on your own, no problem, we will find you a team. So I hope you will be able to join us. And then, of course, later on this year, on November 16th, we will have the AFSIA Solar Awards, but don't forget that the deadline to submit your application, there's 16 different categories. The deadline is September 24th. There's nothing to lose, only fame, pride, and eternal recognition to earn. So make sure to submit your projects, your activities, your innovations. There's really a lot of different categories, and definitely a category for everybody. So this is it for me today. Once again, I would like to thank you, Ederin, Akram, Rajesh, for joining us and sharing a bit of your expertise with us today. And yes, of course, thank you to all the listeners. You will be receiving the full presentations and the link to this video recording today, if in case you've missed something. We will stop the presentation here, but I will leave it on in case you have some last-minute questions that you would like me to share with our speakers today. I will just leave the opportunity for doing this for 1 or 2 additional minutes. This is it for me. Thank you, and you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.